Hello, this video is focused on edTPA for early childhood and how to complete the planning commentary. This is Muriel Rand from New Jersey City University. Let's do an overview of this planning commentary. First, you're going to download the Word template and you're going to type in between the brackets. So there are a series of questions and you're going to answer each of those questions by typing in between the brackets. Answer all of the questions with lots of details. Answer all parts of each question. You'll notice that each question has multiple things they're asking for. And your commentary should be 8 to 9 pages total when you're done with it. If it's less than that, it means you need more details and more examples. Let's now go through each question so that I can give you an idea of what you need to answer for each question. Question 1 is all about your central focus. So this is all about what you are actually teaching. So you're going to describe your central focus and the purpose of the content you will teach in the learning segment. So just give a brief overview, describe your central focus and just give a brief overview of what you're teaching in each lesson. And then B, describe how the standards and learning objectives for your learning segment support children's active and multimodal learning and language and literacy development in an interdisciplinary context. So there's probably going to be 2 paragraphs for this question. The first one is how do your standards and learning objectives support active and multimodal learning? They want to see that this is developmentally appropriate. So give clear examples of active learning, give clear examples of multimodal learning. And then the second paragraph will be how your language and literacy standards are interdisciplinary. So describe your interdisciplinary standard and objective and describe how they are related and how you will make connections for the students on your interdisciplinary context. Question 1C asks you to explain how your plans build on each other to support children's language and literacy development through active and multimodal learning. For this question, you're going to describe your main activities in each lesson plan and show how what you do in lesson 2 builds on what you did in lesson 1, and describe how what you do in lesson 3 builds on what you did in lesson 2, so that they can see the continuum of what you do in lesson 1, 2, and 3 and how they build on each other. And then for question 1D, this asks you to describe how the physical environment which you are teaching supports the active and multimodal nature of children's learning. Well, because of the pandemic, we know that the physical environment does not support the active and multimodal nature of children's learning. So in this question, just describe what your teaching situation is right now, if you're all remote, if you're hybrid, or whatever you're doing. Describe how you're trying to adapt that for active and multimodal learning. And then you can describe what your lessons would be like if you were in the classroom. You don't have to put a lot here. I think they're going to understand very quickly the limitations that we all have right now because of the pandemic, but certainly add a paragraph or so that would describe how you would do these lessons if you were teaching in person. Question 2 is your knowledge of your children. So the first question 2A, they want to know what you know about your children's social and emotional development, their cognitive and physical development, and their language development for communication. So here you're going to describe your students and what they can do. Give examples and consider all of your students. In other words, your students that are typically developing, your students that might be struggling or are a little immature, or your students that are high achievers. And I would make 3 paragraphs. The first one on their social emotional development, give examples. It's best if these examples relate to what you're teaching. And the cognitive and physical development, again, relate this back to what the goals are for your lessons are. What can they do? What is your child's development? This is your chance to describe your kids in the classroom. And what's their language development like? Do you have students who are English language learners, or students whose language might be a little bit slower, or maybe students whose language development is very advanced and you want to build on that? So in this question, you are not describing your lesson plans. You're describing your students and you're giving examples of your students' development. The next question, 2B, it asks you for personal, cultural, and community assets. What do you know about your children's everyday experiences, cultural and language backgrounds, and practices and interests. So again, you are describing your students here, not your lesson plans. You're just describing what are your students' assets. Make sure you're describing assets. Assets means their strengths, not their deficits. Do not write down what they're struggling with or how their home life is impoverished. That will get you an automatic 1. You want to describe here what's good about your students' personal life, what's good about their cultural background, what's good about their language background, and their interests, and how in the next question you're going to describe how you tied that into your lesson plans. But right now, all you're going to answer is what is to describe your students. Question 2C is, again, you're describing your students, your knowledge of your students, and you're going to describe prior learning and prerequisite skills related to language and literacy development. So what can they do and what are they learning to do related to language and literacy development? Cite evidence from your knowledge of this class or group of children. So again, you're going to describe what your students already know that's related to your lesson. What have you been studying in the last 4 or 5 months of the year? And you're going to relate that to what you're teaching in these lessons, but right now, how are they doing? What can they do? What are they learning to do? And consider all of your students, again, not just your typically developing students, but describe all of your students as much as you can. Now, question 3 is going to be you describing your lesson plans. So in question 2, you described your students. In question 3, you're going to describe your lesson plans and how you linked your lesson plans to what you knew about your students. So question A, justify how your planned learning experiences and materials align with your understanding of the children's development, prior learning, and personal, cultural, and community assets from prompts 2A to C above. Be explicit about these connections and support your justification with research or developmental theory. So describe how your lesson plans relate to your knowledge of your students. Include examples of how you linked your lesson plan to their development, how you linked it to their prior learning, how you linked the plans to their personal, cultural, and community assets. Give plenty of examples from your lesson plans. And then at the end, you're going to cite appropriate theory or research to show why you use the strategies in your lesson plan. So you want to show that you're using research-based techniques and strategies. Here you want to use scholarly citations, not websites. You are graduate students or undergraduate students. You're in college right now, so they expect that you should have at least 2 citations similar to what you'd put in an academic paper. Okay? And then question 3, C is describe and justify how you plan to support the varied learning needs of all the students in your class or group, including individuals with specific learning needs. So describe the activities in your lesson plans that support all of your students' learning. Write how you'll support your typical learners, write how you will support your learners with specific learning needs. You can just give them examples of the activities that you're doing, because that's your support. When they mean support, it means what are the activities, what are the learning activities that you're doing in your lesson plans that are going to help your students learn. And if there's any extra help that you're going to give kids with specific learning needs, describe that as well. And now 3C, you're going to describe common developmental approximations or misunderstandings that pertain to the learning experiences you are planning for the children and how you plan to address them. For example, common beginning or transitional language errors or other attempts to use skills or processes just beyond a child's current level of capability. So what they're asking for you here is, what do you predict your students will have trouble learning? Be specific. Think about what you're going to teach them, and before you ever teach your lesson, what do you think your students might have trouble with, and what do you plan to do to help them if they struggle? That's what they want to know here. So we expect that some students might struggle a little bit with the lesson, because if they already knew how to do it, then why are you teaching it, right? So we expect that they might be able to struggle in certain places, and this wants you to tell what you'll do to help them. Okay, let's move on to question 4, supporting children's vocabulary development. This question is easy. Question 4A, you just list the key vocabulary words you are teaching in your lesson. So when they say they identify the key vocabulary, that's all you need to do. You don't need any other description. And then in 4B, identify the learning experiences that provides children with opportunities to develop, practice, and use the key vocabulary. Just list the lesson plan number that uses the key vocabulary. Most of you will be listing all 3 lessons. And then question 4C is you will describe how you plan to support the children during and or prior to the learning experience to develop and use the key vocabulary. So just describe and give examples from your lesson plans to show how the students will learn and use the key vocabulary. So again, cite your lesson plans. Describe what are the activities that you're going to do with them and how you're going to get them to use those vocabulary words. Question 5 is monitoring student learning. So the first part is to describe how your planned formal and informal assessments provide direct evidence to monitor children's multimodal learning throughout the learning segment. So describe your informal and formal assessments and give examples of how they are multimodal. So again, you've put those in your lesson plans. Just give evidence here. Describe what you already have in your lesson plan. You can give a little bit more detail here. And then explain how your design or adaptation of planned assessments allows children with specific needs to demonstrate their learning. So here you're going to describe how you modified your assessments for students who have special learning needs. So this could be how you made them easier or how you're going to make them harder. And again, give examples. If you'll remember, I showed you examples of rubrics that were simplified for kids who needed a little bit more support. Or some of you might have some higher level students who are going to do more on the assessment than your typical learners. So again, they're asking you to describe how you modified your assessments so that students who have specific learning needs can show what they know. Okay, so in sum, make sure you're answering all of each question. There's a lot of parts. Even within a part, there's a lot of parts. Give lots of details and examples. And if you need to, go back and change your lesson plans if you want to change anything. Like having read this commentary, maybe you're thinking, oh, I didn't really use their personal interests very well. Maybe I could put in something more about that. So if you need to, you can go back and change your lesson plans. But that's the summary for your planning commentary. Good luck if you follow these directions. I think you'll do a great job.